All right, we are back for another fascinating episode of Beyond Dimensional Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Liz.
I'm Lori.
And we have a super cool guest today. Our guest deals in a very special area of the spiritual world. Trigger warning, just so you know, for those who have sensitivities revolving around traumatic birth stories, infertility, or losing a child, we want to make sure that anyone who is going to hear this episode does know that ahead of time. Lauren Dionysius, which I have just learned is how you pronounce her name, and I'm very excited about it because I've never heard that pronounced that way, and it's beautiful. Initially comes from a strictly scientific background as a NICU nurse when she was suddenly kind of launched into this spiritual realm on the current path she's in. You will not want to miss a beat of this episode because we're going to be talking about a subject that neither Lori nor I had ever heard about before. And while there's a ton of sensitivity around this topic, we're actually going to do some diving into the magic and healing that Lauren does around all of this. Everyone, Lauren Dionysius.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. There's so much that you've done, so much that you're doing. Give us an overview so that everyone understands, where you've been and what's led you to here.
Yeah, well, as Liz mentioned, I've worked as a NICU nurse for many years, for 20 years, had a very strict Christian, religious, scientific, show me the evidence type background, upbringing, and that was my education as well. And then following a near-death experience in 2011, my whole world changed. And I started to have these experiences with the babies that I was caring for in the nursery, which initially I thought I was going crazy. After all, I was a nurse. I wasn't used to the spiritual world. And so it was a really confusing time for me. But after taking some time off, ignoring it, avoiding it, all of these things, I decided that maybe I should listen. And so I started listening and taking note of the information that I was receiving from the babies I was caring for. And over a period of time, it completely shifted my beliefs around life and death. It completely shifted how I cared for babies clinically, how I spoke to them, what I thought about them, how I handled them, touched them, cared for them, as well as, really big beliefs I had around the process of life and death for us humans and that journey of the soul, which is something I'd never even thought about. So it was a challenging journey in many ways, but as I said, like the wisdom that these babies share in some of the hardest times, like working as a NICU nurse, incredibly emotionally draining area. And that was my biggest question, like, why did babies die? I could not understand for the life of me how that could happen. And so working with babies who were dying or had experienced a lot of birth trauma and landed in NICU in their early days, weeks, months, I learned so much from them about why these things happened, and I found so much magic and beauty and healing for myself as this professional nurse in this specialty that it completely, as I said, it completely shifted everything for me. And so it's so powerful then to be able to share this wisdom with the parents of these babies. Obviously, I couldn't do that in the hospital environment, but stepping out of that now, I can share this information with those who need it most, which is the parents. So that's kind of it in a little nutshell.
That was super Cliff's notes. Yeah. And where do we start? Okay.
It would be super fascinating to just know, like, you're in the NICU, you're a nurse, you're doing medical stuff, and all of a sudden this spiritual flip switch happens. And for someone from a scientific perspective, but someone who wasn't really thinking about spirituality in that way or really analyzing life and death, it's an amazing adventure. So tell us about the beginning.
Yeah, well, I remember that very first time it happened. I was working a night shift in the hospital I was working at. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. I was tired, I was irritable, I felt nauseous, I just wanted to sleep. And the baby I was caring for, we were in a little isolation room because this baby had an infection. So it was one-on-one. There was no one else around. And I was trying to get this baby to sleep. She was really unsettled. She wouldn't stop crying. And my patience was wearing thin at that hour of the morning. She was clean, she was fed, she was, all of the things. And then I went over to her cot and, well, in Australia, we call it a dummy. I think in North America, it's a pacifier, little plastic plug you put in babies' mouths.
I'm glad you clarified because I would have been like a dummy, like a doll that you like ventriloquist with. Like I totally would have been lost. Thank you.
So yeah, I think Australia is probably the only place that calls it a dummy. I don't even know where it came from. Thought I'd better clarify that. But yeah, I went to, put that in her mouth, like just to offer her, some comfort. And I was going to like pick her up and hold her for a period of time to help her settle. And as I picked up her dummy, her pacifier, and I went to put it in her mouth, I saw, and it's really hard to articulate like a visual experience and put it into words, especially when it wasn't your realm at the time. But the best way I can describe it is I saw this image like floating above her head. It was just literally a floating head. It was like a little bit cartoonish. It sort of reminded me of like Elmer Fudd. It was quite a bizarre little like cartoon just hovering above her right side. So it was my left side because I was looking at her. And there was no words. It was just this look of total shock as I put this dummy in her mouth. So, and there was, as soon as I saw that picture and this look of shock, and it was like the mouth was closed and like the cheeks were really full, and there was this instant realization like, oh my God, I've just silenced her voice and told her that it's not okay for her to make a noise, that I was wanting her to be something that she wasn't in that moment. She was clearly moving some sort of energy through her system. That was her way of communicating that. And to me, that wasn't okay, and it needed to stop because of my own, I was tired, cranky, didn't want to be working at 2 a.m. And it was really interesting because as I saw that picture, it was only there for a few seconds, and I realized what was happening, and I looked at this baby, and she completely stopped crying, and she was looking at me with this level of wisdom that was well beyond a baby that was, she was a few weeks old because she was very premature, but, she was probably the size of a baby born at like 32, 34 weeks, something like that. So a couple of kilos she was. And there was this, and it's hard to describe it, it's like this instant knowing that she knew that I knew what was happening. And I was like, my God, for the last 15 years of my career, I've been shushing babies and I've been wanting them to not cry when they've been trying to tell me something or express something to me, or even just move energy through their system that has nothing to do with me. And I'm trying to shut that down. And it was this little process in my mind that's like, wow, this is where it starts. This is where suppression starts. This is where, when babies learn and children learn that it's not okay to express themselves or to feel whatever feelings are going through their system. So again, this all happened in a matter of probably a couple of minutes from beginning to end. But it was the very beginning for me. It was that moment that I was like, oh my God, there's something so much bigger here. I don't understand it. I don't know what it means, but there's something here. And, but I took time off after that night and I had 2 weeks off work.
You're like,
for
am
my
I
mental
having
health.
a psychotic break?
Yeah. I'm like, seeing like cartoons around babies in the middle of the night. There's something
Yeah.
not right here.
Just like, I'm really exhausted.
Yeah. I'm so
Yeah.
tired. I'm seeing shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like hallucinating here. That's what was going through my mind, even though I couldn't deny this deeper message that come around it that felt, that didn't sort of match up with like this weird hallucination type experience. But that was the beginning. And after I went back to work 2 weeks later, things just kept happening. It was like every single shift, one thing after another, and different babies, different experiences, some visual, some hearing, some feeling in my own body. And yeah, but it started from there and just continued to have those experiences in different ways. It was pretty wild.
That's
So
crazy.
did they elevate from like just a vision, then it kind of increased to able to feel and communicate in a different way? Like, what was the evolution of that while you were still practicing?
Yeah, well, it started visual for me with, yeah, just like seeing pictures. And then I realized that I could hear things as well. It's almost like switching on like a different, or turning up a different dial somewhere in my own energy, where it's like, oh, actually I can hear these babies. And oh my God, they can actually hear me as well. Like they could,
Wow.
not on the little human level, but that part of them that was communicating with me, that part could also receive my words, or what I was saying or what I was thinking more than anything back to them. So it sort of went to that next. And then feeling was sort of probably around the same time as the hearing. And then, but what I did learn though is it wasn't so much about me. It was about how, I guess like us here on earth, we all communicate differently. Some of us are better speakers, some of us are better writers, some of us express through color and art and all of that. So I learned it's the same with souls. Like some of them communicate through words, like we're talking now. Others will send feelings, others will send thoughts, others will send images or visual pictures to get their message across, and some will use like a combination of those as well. So yeah, so I learned a lot from that period about receiving this information and then trying to understand like, well, what does it even mean, and why, like why is this happening? Like I couldn't figure it out because I was very much in my left brain. So, but yeah, as you said, Laurie, it was definitely like an evolution that sort of started smaller and faster, and then it sort of got to a point where I was able to have conversations with souls over a period of days and months even, with the same soul at different times. So yeah, it was a very steep learning curve, let's say that.
I've always heard the same thing, which is once you start opening one area, one channel, for lack of a better word, other things come. It was my story. At first, I just know things and there's clairvoyance, right? And then all of a sudden I hear things and then I feel things and then I see things. Like there tends to be this progression.
Yeah.
When we spoke originally, you had even gotten to that level of diagnosing the babies, right? Like you had said something about, they were going into, maybe it was operate on a baby and you were like, wait, that's the wrong thing. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's also super fascinating and something people don't realize. I think they think we have these gifts and we charge people for readings and that's what we do, but it comes out in helping people in so many different ways. And you're able to get to that point where you could actually say, hey, wait a minute, this is not the right course of action.
Yeah, because like for me in that respect, it was definitely more of like a feeling I was getting when I was caring for babies and sort of in their vicinity, I guess, within their energy field, I assume, is I would start to feel physical things going on in my body and things that were not part of my normal day-to-day experience, like, like gut pain and headaches and these sorts of things. And with babies, clinically, it's like when they start to deteriorate, the signs can be very, very subtle and they can then become very unwell very quickly. They can also bounce back very quickly as well on the other side of things. But what I was finding is like I was getting these physical symptoms, for example, like a pain in my stomach. Initially, I just thought I'd eaten something bad for lunch or ate lunch too quickly or something and had some indigestion. But yeah, what I realized is that I could have these feelings and use that as a guide to, hey, there's something going on here because this feeling is not mine. There's no one else around me. There's something going on with this baby, and it would force my clinical mind and clinical assessment skills to go deeper. Sometimes I couldn't necessarily find like a clinical explanation for it, but it would almost like hyper focus on, say, the baby's feeding and how they're handling their food, like their input, their output, how they were behaving during feeds and all of that. And there were times where having felt this pain in my stomach, it could be, hours later or sometimes the next day where this baby would deteriorate. They'd start vomiting. They'd start like their tummy would blow up really big, and would find out that the baby had a gut obstruction. So what I realized I was experiencing is like I was experiencing probably what I would say is like that energetic manifestation of something that was to come, even if it hadn't fully landed or was visible or clinically diagnosable at that time by, they were seen twice daily by doctors, there were nurses at the bedside all the time. It's like this sixth sense that I could use to really hone in on these babies and pick things up earlier. It's like it just made me a little bit more vigilant, I guess. It's like, okay, I've got this pain. It's not mine. There's something going on with this baby. What I found really hard is I couldn't just go to the medical team and say, hey, this baby is, starting to deteriorate. We need to get an abdominal x-ray on this baby to check their gut. Like if I did that, I'd need some sort of evidence, like, what's going on with them to suggest that. And I couldn't say, oh, I've got a pain in my stomach. So it was a bit of like, it was really challenging because I knew intuitively and physically something was happening, but I had to be cautious in many ways with, my duty of care to this baby, but also working within the clinical realm, I guess, or protocols that I was confined to, which was a definite challenge.
First of all, every hospital needs someone like you. You'd think like Your House, the TV show, everyone thinks it's a broken arm and really it's cancer. You being there, having had this, very educated scientific mind, you're there with other medical professionals, and you're sitting there getting a stomach ache going, oh, there's something else going on here. How did you reconcile those conversations? Did you ever have to pull a friend aside and be like, yo, this is what's happening? How did you live in that world and communicate without freaking people out and having them call the loony bin on you?
Yeah, well, I'd often say things like, and I guess, a big part of caring for babies is there is a degree of intuition there, whether whether you're aware of that or not. It's something I think it's almost a skill that you need to develop. You can call it anything you want, like a sixth sense, like your gut instinct, like whatever you want to call it. But because babies, well, we're told that babies can't talk, it's up to us to like pick up on these sometimes really subtle signs. So I would sort of hide behind that. I would, if I was handing over a baby and I was feeling these pains, or maybe it was like a headache or something like that. And, I would say to the nurse coming on, I was like, look, I've just got a feeling about this. I don't know what it is. I'm just feeling like something's not quite right. And then I would possibly hint to what it was. Like, if it was like a headache, I'd probably mention like maybe keep an eye on the blood pressure, or if it's if it was gut pain, I'm like, just maybe like go slow with the feeds or keep an eye on the feeds. So I'd kind of like, just try to hide it, I guess, behind like, I've just got this feeling. Yes, I guess there were ways and words that you could sort of hide that without, I didn't want to dismiss or deny it either, because I didn't, of course, didn't want a baby to be at risk and then me not do anything about it or act on that. But I just had to, just be very selective with my words and how I shared that. And usually, like, I've just got this feeling that something's not quite right, was usually enough to make others a little bit more alert as well.
Totally. So how did you transition and make the decision to move away from being a NICU nurse, where you had this kind of additional sixth sense that others didn't, which kind of made you a little bit more powerful in that area, to then what was the instigator for that? Was there a moment? Was there a situation that you were like, hey, I'm done here. This is my path. This is my journey. I know my mission, my purpose. Was there something like that for you?
Yeah, definitely. I got to a point where I couldn't not share anymore, especially with the parents. I was receiving all of this amazing information, which was really, really helpful for me and really, really interesting. And as I said, it completely changed my beliefs and experiences and my behavior. But, that was great for me. But those that really needed this information was the parents. And in that role as a registered nurse, I was not able to share that information with these parents, and they were the ones that needed it most. So it got to a point where I'm like, I need to share this, and I need to share this freely. It was sort of it was that, and then I'd had these 3 shared death experiences with babies who are leaving the earth, and witnessing what was going on like behind the scenes on a soul level as these babies passed away. And again, it was so amazingly helpful for me. I remember it was like the last one was in August, I think it was August 2020. And I was like, it was the most beautiful experience with this baby. And I'm like, her parents need to know this, but I couldn't. I could not share that information with those parents. It was just completely inappropriate in that role. So I'm like, I need to get out of this. And so, yeah, so that was kind of what pushed me to that point. I mean, I'd started doing this work on the side probably 3 or 4 years prior. So I was starting to at least have a little bit of an outlet and be able to share this with those who needed it. But yeah, I think it was that, and then the combination with, when you're incredibly psychically and energetically sensitive, working in a hospital becomes a very abrasive place to work. And, there was a lot of ethical things that I struggled with, a lot of just how that world operates just started to become more and more not aligned anymore. And it was a gradual process. It wasn't just, yes, I love it here, now I've got to get out. It was like this process of dropping a shift each year and, building up my, being able to share on the outside, that it just became too much of a contrast for me. And I'm like, I can't do this, to the point it was starting to make me feel really stressed and anxious, and feeling like I wasn't doing a good job, because there was this whole part of me that I wasn't able to bring into my work. And so I felt, I guess, a little bit not completely authentic. So yeah, so it was a gradual process, but yeah, it was in 2020 that I was like, okay, I need more freedom to be able to share this, and I don't want to do shift work anymore.
I don't blame you. Seriously, I would imagine being in a situation like that can become really suffocating and impact your mental health, because it's like, I know all these things and I need to be sharing and I can't. And if I do, everyone thinks I'm nuts, and then my career's over anyway, and then I can't help babies at all. So there's this whole, thing that can happen. I would love to hear about when you talked about baby transitioning after death. What does that look like? What happened? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I had witnessed a lot of babies dying, leaving the earth, probably hundreds
sure.
over the years, which was, for the human me, was extremely traumatic, let alone what it took for the parents. And so after I'd sort of started having these spiritual experiences, like basically what was happening was able to see the bigger picture and see what was happening behind the scenes. So in my experience, like when a baby is in the NICU and it's clear that they're not going to survive, what happens is, yes, I mean, there's all the clinical side of things, and you do start to pull back on like different interventions and things like that. But energetic, I guess, side of things is that in my experience, like the soul leaves the physical body. It can be anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours before the physical body dies. And so basically what was happening for me is I was getting it was literally, I guess the best way to explain it is like pulling back the curtain, or like lifting the veil, poking my head through and just seeing what was going on, seeing the beings that were coming, feeling the energy, hearing the music. For me, it was always angels that came to collect the soul of the baby. And it was a huge celebration. What I liken it to is when a baby is born and there's that celebration, like you're here, you're arrived, and there's a lot of joy and happiness. When a baby's born, there's how I interpret it is there's like this certain death from the spirit realm. And then when a baby or a soul leaves the earth, there's that death from the earth world, but there's like a birth or a rebirth into the spirit world. And that was the celebration that I was witnessing with these 3 different babies over 2 or 3 years that I witnessed like leaving the earth. And so it was such a confusing experience for me, because I'm watching these parents on the hardest day
Yeah.
of their
Ugh.
life, witnessing the death of their baby, watching them take their last breath. And then so I'm witnessing that in my 3D world, but then there's this other level of consciousness maybe that is witnessing joy, celebration, peace, freedom, the incredible sense of love and celebration of this soul, and just how free they are to not be stuck in this teeny tiny little body anymore. And so it was really hard as like extremes, and trying to both of those, because they were both, in my experience, both equally valid. One wasn't better than the other. It was just so different, but it really helped me to understand it more and realize that death can be both, even when it involves babies, which I think as a society we seem to be a little bit more accepting of death in old people,
Yeah.
but not in babies and children, whereas it happens all the time. And so, yeah, it gave me a lot of peace around that as well. I can offer that to parents now as well to help them find peace. It's not going to erase their grief and that, but it can maybe soften the edges a little bit.
I love this. We are riveted. We were just hearing about the shared death experience and the unveiling and like the pulling back the sheet of the kind of like the real and spiritual worlds and like how that works with souls and all of that stuff.
So let me make sure I articulate this properly. When you're seeing, what's happening with the baby, do you have any insight, message, experience around why this is happening? Because that's what boggles my brain when I think about it. Karma, right? I'm really grasping my brain around karma. I believe in it, but I'm trying to understand it fully. Babies come in for such a short period of time, and then they're gone, and I don't understand what the purpose of that is for them or the parents. What is your understanding of that? What have you learned?
Yeah, well, it's very different, I guess, for every situation. But I guess the common themes, or what I've learned around karma, especially, is like karma to me isn't about good or bad or right or wrong. It's about balance. And so there's, the way I see it is like that energy wants to come back into neutral, like into like, space. And then it's always looking for that balance. And so with babies who, many of them choose, and it's really hard. Sometimes we have to separate the human side of this topic, and the spiritual side. It can be really hard to find an overlap between the two. But what I find is that, say a baby, many of them chose to be born into a NICU, for whatever reason. Sometimes it is, often, and this is hard for us to understand, but it can be pre-planned. There's a lot for the soul to grow through from the baby's perspective, when they're born that early. So it's a lot about adjusting to the energies of the world. It's a lot about learning how to be a human in a body that is often very small and underdeveloped. They get to experience it. And again, I'm very aware that we sometimes need to step out of our human mind to be able to even take any of this on board logically. Is this different? It's a different experience of being human. When it comes to the karmic side of things, it can be that they have been a NICU parent in the past, or that kind of role, not necessarily a NICU in the way that we know it now, but they've been in a situation where they have been the parent, and the soul is wanting to have a different understanding or different experience of that kind of experience, if that makes sense. So sometimes, it is pre-planned, and I've certainly connected with babies that it's like, I know I was coming to NICU. You tune into them when these babies are born, And
Wow.
they're totally okay with it. They're totally at peace. And meanwhile, everyone else is like, oh my God, it's not supposed to happen. And there's this little baby like laying in its cot completely at peace with whatever's going on. There can also be times, however, where it was unexpected and not planned. And I think what we need to remember here on Earth is that, well, in my experience anyway, that's, I guess, the only perspective I can talk about, is that things aren't set in stone. You know, my experience with these babies is that we don't come in and our life is all laid out and we're just like being these like little robots that are following some predestined path. In my experience, some major things that we may want to come and learn about that are almost like signposted, and you know, these bigger events or learning opportunities or whatever you want to call them. But how we move between the two is, you know, is up to us and our own free will, and you know, and our decision making. And it's, you know, it's that, you know, if something happens, whether it's a decision we make or something that kind of comes to us through someone else, it's, we then need to make a decision or respond to that. And that's what I'd often find with babies born into the NICU, is that there would be something that would happen, whether it was a decision the mother made, an intervention, anything that happened. You know, remembering that, again, in my experience, a lot of past life trauma can come up in birth, which can change the trajectory sometimes for some women of the birthing process. And when those things
Wow.
happen and that energy changes, then babies need to respond to that. But what can happen is, you know, it's like, okay, I'm talking from the baby's perspective here. I suddenly have no water around me. I mean, I don't know if they actually think these words, but this is what the energy feels like. Like I'm going to, you know, I'm at a higher risk for infection now. And it's like, okay, well, I need to make a decision around this. You know, and then obviously there's other decisions that are going on as well, whether they try to keep the baby inside for as long as possible, monitoring for infection. Depending on the gestation, they may want to deliver the baby. It's very hard to say one thing because every situation is so different. But if that happens to a baby, this baby can be like, oh, okay, well, this is where we're at now. And there's zero judgment here. There's zero like resentment or like, why did this happen? Or this shouldn't be happened because I was supposed to do X, Y, Z. There's like, the situation has changed now. My journey to Earth is different. That's the way that Earth operates. And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to respond to this? Or it looks like I could be born like a month earlier than what I was sort of thinking I might be. So I have this incredible ability to go with the flow and not resist things or make things wrong. It's just like, okay, this is where I am now. What's my next step, or what options are available to me now? Zooming out of that a little bit more, we can talk about different timelines as well. And, you know, and in my experience, there's lots of different timelines when it comes to birth. And babies often have an awareness around, oh, this could happen, or this could happen, or that could happen. And, you know, it's like this branches of a tree with how it can unfold. And so sometimes they're kind of like, oh, okay, we're moving this direction. And, oh, okay, actually now this timeline is shifting and we're going there. So sometimes it's a shock. Sometimes they kind of have an inkling like, oh, okay, maybe it'll go this way, maybe it won't. Again, in my experience with the babies I've worked with, nothing is set in stone. But the difference between them and us is that they don't resist it, whereas we have so many loaded expectations around what should and shouldn't happen, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, all of this, and that's what causes our suffering. But whereas babies, that soul energy is much more go with the flow. And there's, as I said, all the babies I've cared for in NICU, as I said, there's been some that have been like, this is unexpected, but never like, oh my God, it all gone wrong. Like, I want to go back. Like, it shouldn't have happened this way. That comes from the humans, not from the baby's soul.
One thing that I've always understood, you know, on a, I want to say intuitive spiritual level, but it's hard for me to rationalize logically, right? Is that, you know, karma is, yes, there's free will, but we do have a predestined plan. We have groups of people that we kind of have these soul contracts with. But as you're saying this, I'm thinking, well, then it's not the baby's karma, it's the parents in some situations, right? Or it could be the baby's soul and they've like, I've got to come back for A, B, and C. but the baby might not know exactly what's happening because it's the parent's free will or yours as a medical professional. Maybe you, as part of your karma or this life experience, need to make a decision that impacts the birth of the baby, that switches things up, right? We're all so interconnected.
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
fascinating to look at it from that perspective, as opposed to, don't be an asshole because I don't want to come back as a cockroach, right? Like, so
Yeah.
simple. What goes around comes around. It's so much more complicated than that. And this is really helpful
Yeah.
in explaining, kind of how that works.
I was like, damn. Now I gotta like think about every person I meet. I'm like, damn, my soul contract is wrapped up in a bunch of shit. I'm like, God, I need to go talk to a spiritual shaman.
You need to look at
Unwind.
people and go, are you going to be part of my karma? The good kind or the bad kind? Where are we
Ugh.
going here?
No, that means I have to be way nicer then. If I have to think about that with every person I have to say, no, absolutely not. I can't do it. People mostly are idiots and I just can't handle that. But that does make me think about, to Lori's point, when it comes to soul contracts, right? And like yes, babies, spirits, souls are much more pure. They're much more open. Does that make it easier for you to be able to communicate with them? Do you think that's really why you have that connection? And in your moments when you're talking now, with the parents, can you speak to theirs? Like, can you hear both sides in any regard
Yeah,
with the
absolutely.
parent and the baby soul?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I work with babies, I always call in the parents of the baby. Soul communication is so much easier often than human communication, is because it is very open. And as you said, it is very pure. It vibrates in a different frequency. I find soul communication it can be very direct and quite blunt in many ways, which we can often find confronting. But probably the biggest thing is that there's very little emotional attachment, whereas we as humans have emotions about every single thing, being good or bad, and not to judge us as humans, because that's part of our experience and how we're often wired. But with the soul's communication, it's almost like matter of fact. When you're talking with the soul, there's not all of that other baggage that is forming part of the communication. It's still there. Our soul carries like imprints, or you can call it karma, or experiences or energy with it that it experiences in different lifetimes. It's all there, but it's like how they communicate. It's almost communicating through that rather than from that baggage itself. It can be hard then to relay that information to this woman who may be like across the screen from me and, say, hey, like what I'm hearing from your soul. Because, there are definitely, in my experience, like soul contracts, soul agreements. We often come back, as you said, Laurie, with the same people, or like the same soul family, or same people or same souls, but in different roles. That's very common. I often have a father and son in this life, and the roles have been reversed in a previous life, so they're exploring that dynamic in a different way. The parent souls very much form part of it, because there are these contracts that are made. But what I'm learning in the soul realms, like the contracts are, yes, they're contracts, but they can be changed or made void or whatever in certain situations, because we do have free will here on earth. And that's why I've had to really shift my own thinking about things being very pre-planned and everything set in stone in our life, because, we have a lot more power than what we often think we do as souls in a human body.
That's huge, actually, because if you think about it, if there was a predetermined everything, then that deflects all accountability for any decision we make, any action we take. So I think that's a really, really important point that sometimes, I know I overlook when talking about karma and repercussions, but it's true. I always say there's free will, because I've seen that. I believe it's true. As we transition to today, and now you've left, that kind of NICU nurse experience behind directly, tell us about what you do now.
Yeah, so I guess the work then changed or shifted into doing baby soul readings. Women would come to me, and I guess I should clarify that this work for me started with babies who were here on the earth, who had been just born, essentially. sometimes like minutes or hours old, and they'd start communicating. But what happened, talking about like the evolution of this, it's that timeline started to expand, and I would start communicating with babies, say, while the mother was in labor. And then it expanded further out. And then as I left the hospital environment, it was working with women preconception and tuning into their baby's souls before they were even conceived, finding out what they need, what they want, finding more insight into their timelines, because we often say, why aren't they here yet? Why aren't I pregnant? Like all of these questions. And these babies can offer a really unique insight and perspective into that, because it's their journey. We all made the decision to come to Earth for whatever reason. They can share a lot of insight around the conception journey. And then also, like, probably I would say 40 to 50% of the women I work with have experienced some sort of loss, whether that's termination, miscarriage, stillbirth, ectopics, chemical pregnancies, like stillbirth, neonatal loss, child loss. And we can tap into the souls of these babies and offer insight into what happened, what went wrong, like how did that timeline play out? Was, because mums often hold a lot of guilt around over that, or like, what if I'd done that, or what if I hadn't have, what if I just rested that day, or all of these layers of guilt that they stack onto themselves. And you tune into the baby, and it can sometimes just be as simple as like, I changed my mind, or I was conceived into a body that wasn't actually going to serve me in the life that I wanted to live. And there's like all different reasons for that. So, and then it's expanded, throughout pregnancy, and like, what does this baby need for birth? Like, what do they want to, who do they want present? Where do they want to be birthed? Like these sorts of things, right up to, and then newborns, like how can we care for them? How can we help their soul integrate more easily into their little human body? And then, toddlers, and like, why isn't my toddler sleeping? Or why, questions around like the eating side of things, and then children and how they want to be schooled. Do they want a traditional school system, homeschooling, like some sort of hybrid education, and right up to like the teenage years as well. So it's just expanded now, like this full spectrum, working with women to connect them with the wisdom. And I am passionate about teaching that to women as well, because I believe we're all souls. We all came to Earth for a human experience. So it's like we're connected to the spirit realm by default. So it's a process. It's not that we're not intuitive or we can't connect. I believe everyone can do what I can do. I think I just had a bit of a baptism of fire because I'd cared for so many babies clinically in my career. But yeah, like reconnecting to those soul realms so that women can hear and connect with their own babies, because they don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to their mothers.
Yeah,
or their
you're the vessel.
So, yeah. So
Sorry to interrupt. I have to ask, it's kind of a sad question. If a woman's trying to conceive, have you ever had the experience where there is no soul baby attached?
Women that have come to me, there's always been baby souls in the energy field, but there needs to be more questions. It's like, why are these babies present? Because some can be there that are planning a life, I don't know, 3 lives down the track. And so it's like, well, just because they're there doesn't mean that they're going to conceive. And that's why, we need to ask a lot more questions. So I believe we all have baby souls, spirit babies, whatever you want to call them, like around us, because they were always souls that are planning to have a life here, or even to learn about Earth, kind of like through us. But we need to ask more questions and say, okay, well, why are you in my energy field? Like, are you planning to have a life here on Earth? When I tune into these babies, it's like, okay, what's your reason for being here? And if they're not planning a life like in this lifetime to these parents, then, there's possibly not a lot of wisdom for them to share. Yeah, there are times where, there are children there, but they're not sure about coming to Earth. It's very rare, I have to say, that women will come and there won't be souls who are wanting to come in this lifetime. Normally, though, in those situations, women are kind of feeling a little bit under pressure. They're contemplating parenthood and they're kind of like, I should have a baby, or I need to make a decision. My time's running out. Maybe I should just have a baby, like, so I don't regret it. Like that sort of energy can be floating around. And so it can often give women a lot of peace to know that, okay, there's babies there, but they're not planning to come to you in this lifetime. It can kind of help those women to release some of that that energy or guilt or pressure around it. But the vast majority, I would say 99%, babies are planning to come, because I always set an intention, like, how may I serve these women? I always put that intention out there, because if I can't help them, or what I'm going to say is going to destroy them, that's not being of service to those women that need it. So fortunately, there's always something. I've worked with some women that have had 8-10 years of infertility, and we can get really clear answers onto why that's happening and what can be done to give the greatest chance of conceiving. And it's different, but again, it's all very conception is a much bigger picture than what we tend to consider it being. We tend to think, I want to have a baby, like, let's go, okay, I'm pregnant, 9 months later, a healthy baby. There's so much that goes into it that we don't take into consideration. So even when it looks easy, there's still a lot that has happened or has gone on behind the scenes for that soul to come. So, and at the end of the day, the soul needs to come to us. We can't just go and pluck them from the ethers and drag them to earth. They need to make that jump. We can only do what we can do, and they often share what we can do for them to support them. But at the end of the day, they need to put their hand up and say, okay, yes, I'm going to go. I'm ready. Like, let's do this.
Yes, it's time.
We can't do that for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know, because I'm psychic, no, just because I know, that Lizzie really wants to know, does she have babies? That's what she wants to know. Now, I said one boy. Remember, I said one boy. But is there any if you chose? And I see one.
I'll deal with baby souls.
But Lauren's the expert, so
I need to know.
Okay, you got to tell us. I think
Chapin.
one boy I see.
If it's not too much pressure.
I do sense, like, when I tune into your energy field, I can see and feel a baby soul. It's like not far from your right ear at the moment. I'm just past like the shadow on the wall behind you is where I'm sensing like the presence of that energy field. Laurie, I agree with you. It does have a more masculine feeling energy. To me, that has zero correlation with biological sex, which, side note, women can get that wrong. Oh, I feel a baby soul around me. Why am I pregnant with a girl? And
I need to do better with that. Thank you for saying that, because I just say boy because I am used to saying male and female, right? But thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but in my experience, like, the soul's energy is predominantly masculine or feminine. It always has both.
Yes.
And often we need to remember that often communication can come more from a masculine energy. Not always, but if there's a strong message a baby wants to share, I can tune in and like, oh, that feels like a strong masculine energy. And then, the mother has like a baby girl. So you can have a masculine feeling soul can be boy or girl, and vice versa for a feminine energy. So that's really, really important to remember. We're tuning into an energy, not a form. So Liz, going back to you, yeah, there is a masculine feeling soul there. What I do then is I tune into that energy of that and what they're like, why they're there. As I said before, it's like, why are they there? I'm not feeling a strong urgency. I feel like this soul has a curiosity about life here on earth, but there's no urgency to come. What I'm sensing from this baby is it's like, it doesn't matter to me if it's like this life or the next life or the one after. If you want to have a life off, that's fine. There's no urgency for me, because why I want to come to earth next is not dependent on the lifetime that I come. I mean, my human brain struggles to understand that as that information comes through. But yeah, so I think, yeah.
So, thank God, firstly. Thank you. Thank you, baby soul, because nobody needs no babies. I think they're probably watching going, yeah, I don't know about.
I want to see if I'm getting something right, because I'm learning this from Lauren in the moment. I came with the male, the boy. I actually see human boy at an age of 5 or 6. I see it.
Sometimes they can project an image of themselves from a previous life, or a future life. I was tuning in with Liz before. I was very specific about this lifetime. And if they had showed me a boy or something, then absolutely. But I have had experiences where babies have said, when I've asked more questions, they're like, no, that was me in the last lifetime, or that was sometimes it was when they passed in a previous life, or an age that they enjoyed or were happy on the earth in a previous life.
And
Yeah,
since I tend to read past lives, that makes sense, or future in a different way. So it's so interesting how we see things differently, but it connects. Anyway, sorry, I just took over the whole thing for you,
No,
Lizzie.
I'm just like, you asked us at the end of our time, and now I have more questions. I have to know, just really quick, does that mean the baby souls stick with you? Like, would they still be with me in my next lifetime or two? Like, do we stay together, or they're like, I'm peeking into this earth, I'll choose my, it's not going to be with you, but I'll try a new one. Like, I'll send this one back. But like, do they bond?
It
It's a good
depends on
question.
yeah, absolutely. It depends on sometimes souls do flit in and flit out. I've had that experience where I've tuned in with a woman and there's been X amount of babies around her, or say there's like a masculine feeling soul, and then we catch up again 6 months later and there's something different going on. So it can even happen within this lifetime as well, that babies come and go. So Liz, in answer to your question, there's every possibility that this soul is just kind of hanging out with you in this life, sending you some energy or supporting you in some way from where they are. It's kind of different to a spirit guide. I don't know, I don't really have a English word to describe that relationship. It's not like it's all about them, or that they're this little vampire that's like, sucking your experience or anything. You may even be here for a few months, weeks, years, and then leave again. There may be a soul contract there that's like, no, I'm just going to hang out in spirit with you in this lifetime and like come in another lifetime. Or there's no kind of set rules around that. It's like every soul, every connection, every presence in your energy field is different, and it can change. And as humans, we hate that. We want to know that, okay, I've got baby souls, there's a boy and a girl, they're going to come to me I'm going to conceive one in this month, and they're going to be the best of friends. Like, we want that certainty. But in my experience anyway, there's rarely that kind of certainty, because the soul is this free spirit source energy that is curious and is contemplating and reflecting and thinking, what am I going to do like here? Like, what sort of experience do I want to have next? Like, when do I want to come? Like, who do I want to come to? Like, all of these different questions that sometimes they have those answers and sometimes they haven't decided yet. So it's like we can't get those answers that we want. So very
My God.
Liz, you book an appointment with Lauren like everyone else. So how can someone reach you, Lauren? Now you gotta book a whole thing and then come back on the podcast and talk about it.
Maybe it's my husband's baby soul.
It's not.
Baby soul.
So I'm right, Lauren? Right? Am I right? Okay, good. I'm glad I was right. But how do people find you? And obviously we'll include the links to everything in our show notes. But how does it work?
Yeah, so I work fully remotely and online. So my business is Born Energy. You can find me on Instagram at Born Energy. My website is bornenergy.com.au. I offer online readings over Zoom, and also distant readings as well, especially for those women who may not, if things are very fresh or very challenging for them, they may not want to jump on a Zoom call with a stranger. So I can tune in remotely and bring through all of the messages and then type that into a PDF document and email it. That's by far like the most common way, especially because a lot of this content is very sensitive, and often women can be in the thick of it and still processing or integrating. So distant readings are the most common, but I also do online Zoom readings as well.
Liz was about ready to book a ticket to Bali, and I was going to come with her. So now it's Zoom. But anyway,
I'm still down. I'm still game if you are.
Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'd love to have you again. There's so much more that we can talk about here, but I'll have Liz get signed up for Zoom so she can have all the answers to her questions.
Questions about my masculine baby soul. We're just gonna exist in this world together.
Oh.
And at least I'm never alone. That's what I've taken away from this.
None of us are ever alone. We just
Thank you so much, Lauren. We can't wait to talk more with you at some point, and just have a wonderful day in beautiful Bali.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.